think the first thing that we need to do is approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Motion to approve.
Second or
Second that.
whoever, I don't know.
Yeah, I second that.
Okay. Hopefully everybody has an agenda here. And I apologize if I put the city services building on it. I'll figure it out at some point, what building's what, but, just a discussion of the claims docket review and library invoice. Joe, do you have something on the library invoice first?
Well, the library invoice, I wanted to make sure that everybody understands, this was approved by the prior city council. At that time, it was $186,000 and that we approved, but the invoice that we received was only $140,000, so that's pretty good news. It generally doesn't happen that way, but the invoice that we received from the library is $140,000. So that's what we'll be voting on here. Scott is on the library board. Am I saying anything that's not correct there, Scott? No, you're dead on. Okay. So I would recommend to the city council, the background on this is that the mayor asked the librarian, make sure I'm accurate on this, Scott, that if anything was going okay, and basically their debt is coming off, old debt's coming off. They're considering building or doing something with a building there at the library, but I don't think anything's formalized yet. But anyhow, their levy was so low without that they would actually be taking a cut in their budget. And so we met with her, I met with her and said, Cook had said, what can we do to help? And so she brought that to my attention, and I wanted to make sure that she understood that this is not gonna be an ongoing part of our budget, that it was a one-time thing, and that this would help out the library, which we need to have a well-rounded community, I believe. So that's kind of the story of it.
Okay.
The other thing
No, go ahead. How about it?
I did look at the claims, didn't see a lot exciting, but there was an item in there, it's not very much. Open Doors of Westfield, it's on the mayor's budget, $4,500. And what that is, I received a request from Jerry, used to be the town manager, can't think of, Rosenberger, to do this. And I thought, well, is this something that we really ought to do? So I kind of called around, and basically, when they were in the actually Open Doors started in here, started downstairs in here, when I was on the town board years ago. And we gave them a free home, we paid the utilities, and it was a good thing. It is expanded now to, they have their own building, so they're absorbing more cost. And the city has agreed, not forever, but for some time, to pay $4,500 as a payment towards utilities every year. And so that's what this is. And I tentatively approved it, and if it passes the claims process, why, that's what it is. But this has been an ongoing thing for several years, and I think Open Doors does a lot of good. I think they, am I saying that right, Todd?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I may just add some further context to that. So Councilor Edwards is correct that there was financial support in way of absorbing the cost of utilities, even in this building and the old fire station. And so when they moved to their new location, they simply asked to continue that annual sum in support of. One thing as a request for administration and as we create more structure, it may be good for us to dialogue about benevolent acts and financial contributions, because we do get a lot of those requests throughout a year's time, and for the sake of predictability and limiting any subjectivity, maybe things like this would be good to consider, whether at this body or full council, just some parameters of what qualifies, who gets, and set maybe some triggers as to when and where does the city contribute in benevolent acts.
I think, Todd, I'd back up what you said. The Fishers, I believe, has a kind of an ad hoc committee that reviews requests like this. And you can't do everything. Westfield has a lot of not-for-profits. I don't know how many, but we got a bunch of them.
There's quite a few at the chamber event last time.
Yeah, and if we gave something to everybody, well, it would become a rather large budgetary item. So we're gonna have a way to windrow it and make sure we're doing the proper thing. I think, Mr. Chairman, that's the only things I had on the.
The other thing that I just want to talk about, just going back to our last council meeting, is when we talked about the claims docket review. Obviously, there were a few items on there that, I was curious about that, and I think going forward, we're gonna be better suited for this. I mean, but, so we had like the roundabout, the $86,000 roundabout, and I mentioned that, and I think the other one was 50, 60,000, I don't really remember.
Yeah, I think you're right.
56 maybe. So, have we ever gotten the bids on those? I mean, just to review those? I mean.
Yeah, and I apologize. When I saw that agenda item, I thought we were talking about the NDOT LPA contract, so I brought those. I can drum up whatever documentation you're asking for. So those were contracted back in late summer, early fall of last year. There was 2 projects. It was 161st in Oak Ridge and then 186th in Grand Park Boulevard. The reason they're paying now is they didn't finish them up. There was hardscapes in both contracts. They didn't finish them up until December, and obviously we don't pay until after the work's done.
Okay.
And there's actually still work in the spring as well.
So, and by the way, I mean, Jeremy, I know you're doing a good job on this stuff. So but I do have a question. Like, it's like in my business, we do percentage of completion, billing. So like when we look at the budgets for items like that, why don't we? I mean, am I being ridiculous to think? And you can say so. It's fine. I mean, because it's okay. But can't we accrue for that? I mean, why do we not put that into 2019? I mean, as a percentage of completion, hey, they're 80% complete. Why does that not go against 2019 budget versus 2020?
That'd be a better question for the clerk. I don't know fiscally.
I know what I'm saying?
I do. I don't know that you can reserve. You have to close 19 at the end of 19. So any projects, many of our projects are 5 years long. We'll be paying on them for 5 years, so they could span actual expenses across 4 or 5 budgets. So
we don't pay them until it's like 100%
we only pay
complete?
for work that is done.
100%.
Well, they may invoice along the way, but it's gotta be work that's completed before we pay for it. Some of them are gonna pay at the end. It just depends on how they want to. Yeah. So you encumber it, we encumbered from the 19, but it carries to the 20.
Yeah.
19's closed out, and those dollars.
Because the first thing I saw when I saw that stuff, and I mean, I don't want to make a big issue of this, but at the same time, it's like, so I'm like, well, that's odd. I mean, why wouldn't that be in 2019?
I understand what you're saying. I don't disagree with you, and I would defer to Cindy on the reasons why. It's not what I do. Right, we don't pay until we get invoiced. We have a 45-day pay period, and they legitimately were finishing them up in December.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'd like to see just the bids.
If you,
I mean,
I will send you whatever
Okay.
you want. Yeah.
okay, cool. Thank you. All right. You guys have any comments?
Yeah, the only thing about, we would like to know in here probably the projects that are coming up like that. In other words, you just say, well, we got this roundabout, it's gonna be about 800,000 or whatever, whatever it is. And it gives us some more clarity about what's going on.
Is that on that spreadsheet?
Yeah, of course. Now, things like roundabout landscaping wouldn't be on that capital list, but it's approved in your LRS budget that was approved last year, so
Yeah, right.
it's reflective in the budget
So
itself.
it's in the budget then.
Correct.
But when we see it on a claims report, it doesn't always, it doesn't always click through, well, this is. a part of that.
Understood, and in the past, the council didn't see those contracts. Now that we have the ordinance in place and the contracts will be coming to you,
Okay,
you'll see them in the front And then when the work's done, many times 6 to 9 months later, then you'll see the docket invoices being
Okay,
charged.
All right,
okay,
that's
okay,
fine.
awesome, thank you. Okay, is Shannon here?
No,
Okay, is she not coming?
I didn't talk to, did she reach out to you?
Yeah,
She mentioned she wanted to come, but
yeah, she said she was gonna present. She said she wanted an early slot.
She might be at the other building.
I was gonna say, Scott, is it possible that maybe you could reach out to her and find out if she might be at the
I've,
services building?
yeah,
Is this YMCA?
yeah, yeah, okay, yeah, all right. Okay. Well, while you're doing that, let's move forward to the 161st Street Tunnel, finance, accounting, engineering, discussion, et cetera. So, obviously, we've received, you know, everybody on the city council has been inundated with emails about, I may have even heard chants of build the tunnel, but, just a few. But then I've also heard on the other side too, that people that are against it, right? So, and, I'd like to kind of get maybe a little more in-depth into the costs and structure and just have more of an open discussion about this. But one of the things, I was sitting, my wife and I we were at the Bridgewater and we were having dinner the other night. There's no kidding. A gal comes up that we know and she says, if you build that tunnel, you better build one at Oak Ridge, you better build one at this road and this road. And that's when I sent out an email to all the other counselors and I said, well, shoot, let's just do a referendum to all the citizens of Westfield for about a $40–50 million referendum. Let's see who wants all these tunnels and who doesn't want them, because maybe that's what we do. Cause it's like, we're gonna go into one cost after another. And I'm not saying that it's not dangerous. I went out to the path myself and I talked to people. I think a lot of the people are unaware of the East Crossing. They're unaware that, the trees would, be tore down. I think, from an aesthetics point of view, this is just my opinion, but, for me, unless there is no way, I'll just tell you, there's no way, I could say yes to it without the fact that, we're gonna have some kind of wall or do something aesthetically, for Linda's property, because I don't think it's right to basically say, hey, look, we're gonna tear down all these trees and then, by the way, everybody can see in your windows and you're gonna have to make amends for that. So, with that being said, but I will tell you, another counselor who's not here, also stated that, he said, why have we not put in, and maybe you guys can address this, cause maybe we have, rumble strips. In fact, Scott and I were talking about, speed bumps, just other things. So, I got the emails, but I don't know if you guys wanna talk a little bit further about that, if we've done that, and then also talk about where the money's coming from. The whole ball of wax, so.
So I guess your first question was rumble strips. I'm assuming you're talking rumble strips on the roadway, not the pedestrian trail,
Right.
correct? We have not done that. Typically, they're done with thermoplastic strips. We have some over at 161st and Gray. Certainly an inexpensive option that we can try. Much like anything like that, they become white noise after a period of time if you run that corridor enough.
Yep.
But certainly an inexpensive option that we can put forth.
Yeah, so I'll give you a good example. I went out, I crossed the path about 5–6 times, took pictures. This is no kidding. I was actually telling Jake Gilbert this. As I was crossing heading north, probably the first time, and I get why it's dangerous because, I'm old, but an older gal with a handicap sticker up on her thing, literally I got up to the thing, I swear to God, she gunned it. I swear I heard the gas rev. She's like, man, I'm getting past before you start to cross. I'm like, my God, she's actually picking up speed, coming up the hill.
Yeah, and the perfect storm is when
must
one
have
car
known.
stops and you go, and then that happens.
Yeah, right.
That's the confusion.
So, I mean, from that standpoint, I'm standing there going like, yeah, okay, I get it, you know. At the same time, I waited, I was patient, and then I crossed. I could have gone down to the east and maybe gone down there, and she would have revved it up there too, probably. I mean, there's certain people that are gonna just do that. So that's why I was thinking, on the rumble strips, speed bump, and then, even beyond that is, I mean, and I know we have lights, and this probably presents other, issues, but, what do we call the one thing, the hawk something?
Yeah, the Hawk signal. It's a Hawk system.
The
Yeah.
hawk system, it's almost to the point where it's red flashers, and you have speed bumps, and the cars do stop, and people pass,
So creating a stop sign there?
I mean,
Red flashers means stop, so
Yes.
every car would have to
Yes.
stop.
well, it's, the red flashers only if there's people on the path coming, and I get it, it's an inconvenience for the Carmel Runners Club. I mean,
My concern is just traffic and congestion.
Yeah.
That's effectively what the Hawk system does, but it does it in a controlled environment, so it goes to a caution, then it stops, then people go across, and then it comes out of that.
yeah. I think another counselor had a really good idea that they threw out, and they said, we have all this time, I mean, why not even get a police officer to go out there and try it and see what the traffic does do? See if it does back up. I mean, can we do that? I mean, how,
I
do we- I don't even
won't
know how we
speak for the
facilitate
police,
something
but
like
yeah,
that.
I'm sure we can accommodate that.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman,
yeah,
I went down to Carmel, not that I hold Carmel up to having the final answer for everything, but I wanted to see what they did. And I started at 146th Street, they had a bridge. US 31, they went under, those are gimmies. The rest of them are just regular crossings, cross at your own.
There's a bridge at Carmel Drive as well.
Well, yeah, you're right, I haven't got that far yet. But
Yeah.
Carmel Drive, yep, there's a bridge. And then I looked for this tunnel. And when Joanne and I were first married, which has been some time ago now, we took up housekeeping on 116th Street. And I know where the Monon went across. Well, I looked for a tunnel there, didn't find it. And after the third attempt, I finally found a tunnel. And tried to take some pictures of it. I won't tell you about that deal, but,
We actually had some pictures in our presentation to council.
it looks pretty nice. It really does. It's down deeper than I thought a tunnel would be, and if ours was down that deep, it'd be pretty darn low. But there's grade and everything. But 116th Street, I think, probably has about the same kind of traffic as 161st Street now. And so, if we're considering a tunnel, we ought to do it right. But I think we have to explore all the things that deal with public safety. I like the looks of it, but, I'm not a real good judge of all those things of public safety. And maybe there's something better. And so we ought to kind of take our time and see what happens with some of these studies. And because we're gonna get into a situation where there's gonna have to be a tunnel for everything. I can see a need for a tunnel on 191st Street up by Grand Park.
It would likely be a bridge, but yeah.
But, are we gonna tunnel everything, or or bridge it? The bridge is about as expensive as a tunnel, really.
In this case, for 161st, it's more expensive, yeah.
So, I think we gotta take our time and make sure we are doing the right thing. I think the answer will become apparent pretty soon, but I think the way we finance it is another thing, and this is just my opinion. When we use TIF, we're paying money out of whatever pocket we can find it in, basically. And that's what this smacks of. I wonder if this is even in the TIF area where that is. Cindy Spoljarek doesn't think so, but I don't know. I can't find the map.
It's not in the specific TIF area.
Well, can we use that
but
TIF
it's-
money? Can we use that TIF money for that legally?
is that a legal opinion?
This is not a legal opinion, but in the past,
there's language in those EDAs, those economic development areas, that states that if it impacts the economic viability of the area, which 161st Street would, you know,
Yeah, but
that's
how would that impact it?
the traffic flow.
Well, the other thing, I'm
Traffic's still
not,
gonna get there. Okay.
I'm not here to argue that. That's to be argued at another
And
place.
we do have Brian Zeger looking at that.
I think that if we're gonna do it, we just ought to belly up to the bar and borrow the money and do it, instead of screwing around with TIFs for everything. I mean, they do have their place, but, you know, we have the lowest debt-to-person ratio, and $6.5 million is not gonna change that dramatically. So I think if we decide to do it, we ought to belly up to the bar and borrow the money.
We're happy to spend the money however you get it.
Okay, all right. Now, that's opinion.
Yeah, so from our perspective, you mentioned take our time and study. I feel like that's what we've been doing. We've been working on the project for 6 years. Quite candidly, from Public Works perspective, I just need to know if someday we're gonna build the tunnel. If someday we're gonna build a tunnel there, then we're in our best interest to keep forward with design, with the contract that we already have with United. If we're not, I need to start taking steps to cancel that contract.
Yeah.
And those professional services aren't gonna get cheaper either.
Right.
I'll tell you from my perspective, what keeps going through my mind is, you know, we've looked at this, we've looked at the work that's been done, and you can't really look at the work that's been done and find fault in anything that's been done there, so there's no issue with that. My concern is, have we explored every option that we can, or as many options as we can, to find out that, again, that forgive the elementary nature of or the simplicity of this, but to me, it looks as if we've decided, is a bridge or a tunnel the right decision? I wanna feel comfortable, I wanna feel confident that we know that whatever we do moving forward is the best decision, and it's not just between a bridge and a tunnel. What other research, what other things have we looked at that have been said, hey, this can't work and here's why. This might work and here's why we think it potentially could be successful in helping us get where we're wanting to go. Those are the type of things that I'm really interested in seeing. I'm speaking from myself, I don't know if that,
No, I would agree. I don't wanna base our decision on conjecture that, hey, traffic's gonna get backed up. Why wouldn't we bring a policeman out there for 2 weeks, stop traffic? Put in the rumble strips, put in the speed bumps even, you know, and put up a sign. That's a lot cheaper.
So, from the administration's position, how would you want to move the ball forward? Because obviously it's just a project that's drawn a lot of attention, not only in the financing model, but the final outcome. So in order to get comfortable that all due diligence has been exhausted, how would you like to move forward? Inclusive of a law enforcement officer, and I won't commit that obviously on behalf of Chief Rush, but if we have boxes that need to be checked, you know, history being a guide and then moving forward, how would you like to do that? If we can beleaguer it in this setting, not today, but a project team, one of you sitting with us and say, okay, we know the application over under has been studied, so under, but at grade, Hawk Systems, rumble strips, you name it. What would, in the stacking effect and traffic projections, is that thoroughfare is on the thoroughfare plan, and eventually one day in the future will be widened. So to Councilor Edwards' point, is it 116th Street 2.0, you know, at 161st Street? So we understand the angst and the impacts, to your point, the aesthetic value of the adjoining property owners, that being incorporated, what does that look like in a final design? Working with the property owner to incorporate that if the tunnel is a solution. So, that being said, if we don't set some benchmarks, we're gonna be talking about this in July, this very same thing.
Yep.
So how would you like to move forward? One of you-
I'd say this in the council's defense. I was on the council for 4 years prior to this, and I didn't hear a lot about this until right now.
Well, the impetus was the pedestrian and the dump truck, and so, as I noted in previous conversations, we didn't want to be the typical government unit that we've got to have 5 people die before we do something. So
That's
it's
true.
good, we're moving the conversation forward, the community's engaged, so we're here to work in lockstep, and publicly, it's not adversarial between the administration or the council. So to move the ball forward, what would you like to do?
I think we put together a checklist and say, hey, this is what we do. The checklist is, and we address each issue. You know, I mean, I don't think, you know, again, I just don't wanna base anything on conjecture. So,
Yep.
I mean, if we put in the rumble strips, have a
Yep.
policeman do it, that's A, you know? I mean, we see what the backup of the traffic is, you know? I mean, we do that. Once we get through those things, then we can go down to the financing side.
Yep.
Because there's also some thought, you know, from some people that, you know, in 2030, by the time we make it 4 lanes, not in absolute dollars, but in inflationary dollars, it's actually gonna be cheaper to do it at that point in time, because all the equipment's gonna be there, the road's gonna be tore up anyways. So, I mean, that's just for, you know, from conversations I've had as well, so I mean, it's.
Certainly something to be considered. I mean, obviously, we did that with the actual, what we call the coffin. When they
Yeah.
ripped it apart, we dropped that in there for such a time as this. So what we can do is we'll work with United, because they're the subject matter experts, if you want us to, model that traffic out if we don't already have it. Current day volumes, I think we do have some traffic count, or
Yeah.
some volume counts on the trail itself. We try to do some traffic counts on there. Those are inputs, and what does it look like? If we put rumble strips, what will it do?
I think Jeremy's right. I mean, people ignore it after a certain period of time.
We tried putting a pylon right in the middle of the intersection, and you thought
They just run over it, don't
the
they?
world was going to implode because we put a bollard right in the middle of 161st Street.
Yeah.
So those are the type of things, I mean, so the things that you've already tried,
Yeah.
the things that we've tried, and again, I'll say here in front of everybody, I don't have a full list, I don't have a full knowledge of
got it.
what all those different things are
Okay.
that we've tried.
Sure.
That would be helpful, just so I know what we're looking at, because
Yeah.
again, I don't wanna take lightly not only the impact that it has on the residents in the area, but also the fact that $6 million is not something that we're just gonna
For sure.
hand over without thinking about it.
Yeah.
So, I just wanna feel comfortable and confident that,
Yeah.
hey, here's what we've explored.
Yeah, for sure. We can give you a to-date, solution that we've tried to provide. The bollard in the middle of the street, I mean, that lasted about 4 hours before the
Yeah.
world started going crazy.
You know, I mean, the reason this is, I mean, not just from the standpoint that, I mean, it's interesting because, you know, you have property owners on either side that are impacted. But, you know, when I was out at the site and there was a guy that actually just ran into Melt the trail, right? And I talked to him, I talked to a bunch of other people. And so one gal came up and we were talking, and she said, yeah, she said, you guys have got to build this tunnel. I said, yeah, you know, it's $10 million, right? She goes, oh, I don't want to spend that much.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, you see what I'm saying?
Oh,
I
hey,
mean, my point is that it's real dollars. And then and I told Scott this, I said, I think we're gonna do a special assessment on the Viking Meadows and people that live here at Pulte. It's gonna be $2,000 a year. And the guy goes, no. Oh, okay, so everybody else has to pay for it.
Counselor, I've been here long
You know what I'm
enough
saying?
that we want high-quality schools, excellent public safety, roads and trails, but don't raise my taxes, don't spend any money,
That's
and
right.
don't borrow any money, and don't spend any cash. So,
Get back to me when you have it figured out, right?
This tunnel down at Carmel has, you go both ways on the trail. I finally did find it, took a picture of it, and I won't tell you that story about taking the picture. Yeah, I will too.
does it involve law enforcement?
Yeah. On these cameras, and this is right here, I took a picture and I thought, yeah, I'm taking 3 pictures of this. This will give me some idea of what I can talk about or think about. And you know, I had the camera reversed and I had 3 pictures of myself when I got home, and none of that. But anyway, that tunnel, if it cost a dime, it cost $10 million.
Yeah.
And it is lighted, it is deep, and it is nice. And you have to start way back. I mean, it's just not, well, you just drop into the tunnel. It's way, way back there. So you got a lot more grading to do than you might think. And then there's a division where the people who want to get off on 116th Street can walk up kind of a stairway-like thing and get on 116th Street. More cost.
You know, there's another tunnel and application on the Hazeldale Parkway, just north of 146th Street. It connects neighborhoods, barely if
But
you didn't know it was there, it's a
The
slight
trail
rise.
to the- yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of a hump,
Just
though,
north
isn't
of-
it?
Yeah, so there's another trip, just as a point of reference, right? So what we'll do is give you a detailed synopsis of historical actions that we've done to try to bring remedy to the situation at grade. Those other things we've yet to employ, but the pros and the cons related to those, traffic stacking, et cetera, trail volume, we'll represent those. And then we can get into the financing component of it. Utilizing the TIF, I understand there's varied viewpoints on that. That was just a solution. We can work together to figure out if that in fact is what we're going to do, the tunnel. There's a varied number of ways we can go and provide financing for that.
There ought to be some grants out there too for this rails to trails business and.
Well, that in and of itself, I know that Next Level Trails of the State, that money by Q2 this year will be already dispensed. And as you know, we've submitted to the Metropolitan Planning Organization for this crossing. And their metric is, one of their metrics is fatalities, and we've been denied.
Let's don't get any.
3 times. Yeah, so, okay.
Is there any limit to the number of times we can request that?
No, but we can continue to request.
With what?
Keep in mind that that's a 5-year program, so, and that's in my email that I sent you all, that's what I was alluding to. If we're waiting 5 years, we need to continue to try to get that money.
So, a couple things that Joe had mentioned there, I wanna just get a little clarification on this if I can, and again, help me out if you don't mind. With the tunnel, as it's proposed right now, when that is completed, it is going to be, to the west, just to the west of where the path goes currently, correct?
It is under the western half of the path.
Okay.
It is still in that same, I can't remember the width of the corridor. We've already, keeping in mind, we've already built that half on
Correct.
that side. We shifted it that way because there is a massive fiber trunk line that runs down the rail corridor. We moved it over there to avoid that and some other things.
So it's my understanding then that once that is completed, obviously the entrance or exit, depending on how you're looking at it, to the tunnel, is gonna be far north and far south of that intersection currently because of the grade and that type of thing.
Correct, so as the tunnel, you can only have a 5% slope
Correct.
because of ADA compliance. So as it comes and ties in at grade, that's when we talked about topographically how it's on a hill. That's one of the reasons why it's cheaper than a bridge, is because the natural slope is already there. So when it ties in, then there will be an on and off ramp, if you wanna call it that, where people from 161st Street access the tunnel, or vice versa.
That on and off ramp, as you referenced it,
Looks like that's the south edge of it.
that's gonna, there will not be any access to 161st Street there, is that correct? I mean, that's gonna be blockaded, barricaded, whatever.
So there would be, and I don't know exactly what it will be, but there will be some kind of barrier that keeps people from crossing the road anyway. Is that the root of your question?
Yes.
Yeah, we would have to accommodate something there. There would be no crossings, and I don't know exactly, we're not that far into the design yet, but we would do everything we can to encourage people to get on the tunnel.
Okay.
If
Keeping in
I
mind,
want, go ahead.
doing all of this so the on-ramp and the tunnel in the same footprint of the corridor, with the exception of a small piece of land down at 161st Street.
Okay, because that's what I wanted to kind of get the clarification, that you went exactly where I was going with that, was if we put this tunnel in, are we still gonna have people wanting to cross there?
We were gonna do everything we can to prevent that, yes, just like
They do at
everywhere
Carmel.
else. Yeah,
Yeah.
but there are always going to be pedestrian facilities on 161st Street, north or east-west, right? So people that don't want to get on the tunnel, or if they wanna continue to head down to downtown, that they would be able to walk across, or they can turn and get on the tunnel.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
We're gonna do the right thing, just, we gotta be sure we're doing it right.
Understood.
Hey, Troy, I gotta run, but Shannon's bubble meeting was at 8:30 PM. So she's asked if she could come next month.
okay. All right,
Hey, one more question, I apologize, I looked back at my notes, and forgive me, I'm making sure you exercise this morning, I guess.
Sure, yeah.
The other thing that Joe had pointed out, talking about, and again, not to keep comparing the Carmel Tunnel, but that's the closest thing we have around here, so.
Right.
With the Carmel Tunnel being buried as deeply as it is, is there gonna be any impact, or what can we expect, or, I'm assuming there's no issue or no problem, I just wanna be positive that I understand it. This tunnel is gonna be really very near the road surface, is that correct, as far as the depth?
John, do you remember how deep it is? The cap, I think, is 2 or 3 feet below the road grade currently.
We're not going any deeper than we have to.
Okay, and there's no, I mean, no long-term as far as like, again, this is gonna sound silly, but I just wanna be sure, there's no long-term, complication created there with the roads and things like that being that close to surface?
From a pavement preservation perspective, you mean, or?
Or a future road construction perspective.
Rumbles and,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're designing in advance of any future widening on our First Street, so it'll be all in coordination, with any future.
Yeah. So when United designed that back in 12, I think it was, or 13, they took into consideration the vertical line site issues as well as the future, where the road was going to be in the future and how things would change.
So 4 lanes
best
to
we
go,
could.
and they wouldn't have to adjust at all.
Exactly. That was the sole purpose of phase 1 of the project, is to do 2 things. One, primarily not have to close 161st Street when the tunnel was built, and if we did them both at the same time, you'd still have 161st Street open. They'd build the southern half, flip it over, then build the northern half. So it was all planned with the idea that 161st Street wouldn't have to close for 161st Street construction or the tunnel construction.
Right, right.
I'll bet that is 15 to 20 feet below the street level there on 116th Street in Carmel.
And
It's down there.
That has everything to do with existing topo conditions and what the roadway and
They're kind of
utilities and-
similar, because you go over and go
Yeah,
down to a
they could be
creek.
going under water mains over there that
Yeah, I
we are
don't
not,
know that.
our water mains are gonna go around it. There's just so many details
Yeah.
that go into it, I can't explain to you why it's deep.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll get you a checklist of everything,
That'd be great.
Which I think, I mean, I think maybe we'd try to do it, but it's not in anything kind of formal setting, so maybe more of a formal checklist and say, hey, let's do this, this, this. I think the other thing we probably ought to add is we ought to bring in the chief of police, I mean, and ask him. Because, I talked to him after the one meeting, and he said, there is an issue. He runs 3 times a week in the tunnels in Carmel, there's ice. In the tunnels. He said,
Okay.
that's a problem. The other issue is, and I was talking to the gentleman who did, when we were, the Melt the Trail thing, and Todd, I think, was there, maybe when I was talking about it, is, we're standing there and 4 bikers came through, and I've gotten an email from, bikers group. Well, we wanna use it because we wanna use the tunnel more. I can't see anything wrong with 30 bikers going down all at once into a tunnel, it's like, what could go wrong, right? We saw 4 of them all together, and then the chief of police said, well, they're only supposed to be 2 at a time. So that's a whole nother issue, because we had 4 of them go, and by the way, those 4, they didn't stop. They didn't stop, and the mom on the other side, so she steps off the trail while these 4 bikers go along. It's like, that's a problem. So, and from my understanding, I guess they're not even supposed to be on the trail, right? At 4?
No, it's a bicycle trail.
But 4 at a time.
No, I think they're supposed to be in pairs, but that's a policing issue, we'd have to contend with that. Tunnel or no tunnel.
Right.
It's a real issue. The majority of the time, when you see those kinds of groups of bikers, they're out in the country somewhere. I've not seen them on our section of the Monon, not that it hasn't happened, but.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
The only other thing I'll add, and if we're bringing in the police chief, we should bring in the fire chief as well to talk about, you mentioned speed bumps a couple times.
Yeah.
It'd really be a tabletop type crossing there, it wouldn't be a bump. Historically, that's been a concern of the public safety folks because of the bump.
Okay, that's a good point.
Because if you're putting an IV in somebody's arm in the back and they gotta stop or go over these bumps, those are concerns for the
Okay.
paramedics and things, but
Yeah.
if we're gonna have that conversation, let's have it
No, I
with them
think
as
we
well.
should, yeah.
Okay.
I think it's good.
I might say there is some angst among some of the counselors about using TIF. I think I probably already said that, but we've got to overcome that one way or the other. So what I've made is just a suggestion, but if we're gonna do it, we ought to have the hair on our chest to stand up and do it, and make it happen.
Okay, let's talk, just briefly, I mean, we're ahead of schedule, so we're gonna be done early, probably, or maybe. So let's talk a little bit, I just wanna update everybody, so we had, an ADP meeting, on the quarterly budget, or it kinda goes on with the quarterly budget discussion. I thought the meeting went really well. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of tools that we haven't been using. I mean, just from a standpoint of ADP has a new product or something coming out, or within a week, and I don't know where we stand on that.
Well, I had a long conversation, and it's going to take multiple hours to complete the projects, given the fact that today only 130 employees have their time position into the Workforce Now, and there's 250 employees. It will take a very deep analysis and backfill of data into Workforce Now, and then a full import from Workforce Now into eTime. Once that's done, then we can use the single sign-on, enable that, and they can begin using their ADP, My ADP. They can use mobile or My ADP. So, I mean, again, this is not, it's what I've been trying to say, this whole ADP thing, eTime thing, is not just something we can go check box.
Yeah,
There's
sure.
a whole lot of work that's involved in this, so this is gonna take a while.
Yeah,
So-
I can't imagine we're the smallest of businesses that they
No.
probably have done this with, though. I mean,
Yeah,
surely
I mean,
they've done it.
It's just,
Yeah,
but we've got to backfill it, so they said it's gonna take a while, so this is just gonna take a little bit of time.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I agree, it was a productive meeting. I request that we get some sort of a benchmark, so we know that these milestones, if we need to get 130 plus, or the remaining amount of employees engaged in that, then
250.
I need, as the chief of staff, that the directors report up to me, I need a benchmark of when that needs to happen, and I can make that happen. So if there's a project manager on the ADP side that can lay this stuff out for us, then we need that, so we can optimize this platform.
We are working on that, like I said, it's not just something that's overnight, so.
Yeah, I know that.
So let me jump in here if I may. So I apologize, I was not able to attend the ADP meeting. I understood that it went very well. I understand that it was a very informative meeting. One of the questions that I have, and I guess I should have asked this before, with that meeting, were we able to get our arms around everything that both departments are looking for here, or both groups are looking for?
I think so. I think based upon the Heather who remoted in, all those dimensions were very helpful. And it will remove a lot of duplicity in effort when a member of the team wants to take a day off. The director or the manager will be able to see who already has days off inputted in the system. And then it also auto-populates into their timesheet. Right now, it's, hey, boss, I need to take this day off. And there's a lot of manual interaction going on. So
well,
with
there's no
those.
doubt it's gonna help with the quarterly budget
100%.
process.
So well-rounded,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And she was able to show you the solution within ADP that allowed you to do that?
Correct. yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like what we need to do is have Heather get with you. Heather's gonna be the the go-to person?
No, she has to turn it over to the project services team, and I'm waiting on a call from them. They said they'd call me today.
Okay.
So, but also on the fire side, because they have a totally separate system from eTime, and I had to give the approval to be able to do that. But I need, they're gonna work on a CVS file, but I need a contact person at wherever it is that they have to do this, so they can work with ADP to do the CVS file, to be able to download that stuff into eTime.
Yeah, I'm sure if you reach out to Rob Gaylor, he can make that connection, because he's the admin chief.